Christmas Eve was supposed to be about family until Grandpa dropped a bomb that shattered everything. The Davenport mansion was a masterpiece of wealth and taste, tucked into a hill in California, its windows glowing warmly against the winter night. Outside, the snow had started falling softly, frosting the gardens and gilding the towering pine trees. Inside, laughter and chatter filled the grand dining room, champagne clinking, the aroma of roasted turkey and cinnamon pies hanging in the air. But one man stood apart from the celebration, a glass of brandy cradled in his hand like a weapon. Richard Davenport, 82, billionaire, patriarch, and legend in his own right, cleared his throat. The room quieted instantly. Even the roaring fireplace seemed to pause in anticipation. "I've decided," Richard began, his voice steady, almost eerily calm. "Everything I own, every property, every share, every dollar is going to Clara." The room froze. Olivia Davenport, his eldest daughter, dropped her fork. Red wine sloshed dangerously close to her pristine tablecloth. "What?" she shouted, eyes wide, voice breaking with disbelief. Her tailored emerald dress shimmered under the chandelier, but it couldn't hide the shock that made her hands tremble. Victor, his only son, usually a master of calm calculation, slammed his hand on the polished oak table. "You can't be serious, Dad." His deep voice echoed through the high-ceilinged room. He had the kind of intensity that could make even the bravest executive hesitate, but tonight, he was powerless. Ethan, 30, grandson and quietly observant, felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had expected some surprises. Tonight Richard was unpredictable, but nothing like this. Clara, who even was she to command his grandfather's empire overnight? And then there was Clara herself, standing near the fireplace, calm, composed, serene. At 28, she was young, elegant, and far more poised than anyone expected in a situation like this. Her soft black curls framed a face that held secrets behind her deep brown eyes.
She didn't speak. She didn't need to.
Her smile small, knowing did all the work. Olivia's hands shook as she struggled to regain composure. "You can't just," Richard raised a hand. "I can, and I have." Whispers erupted. Some staff hid behind doorways, unsure whether to intervene. Aunt Margaret clutched her pearls like a lifeline. The tension was tangible, almost suffocating. Ethan's mind raced. He had known Clara for weeks, but only superficially. A mysterious woman, charming, intelligent. Yet there was something more, something deliberate. Why now? Why on Christmas Eve? And why give everything to her instead of the family who had worked alongside him for decades? The fire crackled as if reacting to the chaos. Outside, snow swirled against the tall windows, oblivious to the storm inside. Every eye in the room was fixed on Clara, and every thought was a mix of suspicion, anger, and curiosity. Ethan leaned back, quietly assessing. Clara had a presence that was magnetic. Even Olivia and Victor, furious and red-faced, couldn't ignore it. She moved as if she already owned the room, her body language elegant, unflappable. And maybe he realized she did. The grandfather's announcement had turned a night meant for laughter into a battlefield of emotions. Some guests whispered about money, some about love, and some about betrayal. And yet, one question lingered in Ethan's mind. Is Clara really who she says she is, or is there something darker at play? The room remained tense for a few long, uncomfortable seconds. Then, as if on cue, Richard raised his glass. "To family and to unexpected gifts," he said, smirking faintly, the firelight dancing across his wrinkled but sharp features. Olivia's hands dropped to the table. Victor's jaw tightened. Ethan's eyes never left Clara. And Clara, she smiled.
Calm. Certain.
Untouchable. The night was far from over, and Ethan knew, with a cold certainty, that this Christmas Eve would be remembered for more than laughter and presents. Secrets were about to unravel, loyalties would be tested, and the Davenport family would never see their patriarch or Clara the same way again. Who was Clara really, and what did she want with everything Richard owned? Ethan had a feeling the answer would change everything if he lived to find it out. The morning after Richard's shocking announcement, the Davenport mansion felt different. Colder, somehow heavier. The halls, once filled with laughter and holiday cheer, were now thick with suspicion. Even the staff moved more cautiously, as if one wrong word could ignite the family's simmering anger. Olivia paced in the grand hallway, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. How could he do this? She muttered under her breath, clutching a gold-framed photo of her late mother. Everything we've built gone. To her. To Clara. Victor lounged on a velvet chaise, arms crossed, jaw tight. I don't trust her, he said, voice low, eyes narrowing as he watched Clara glide past the doorway. She's too perfect.
Too calm.
This is a strategy, not love. Clara, on the other hand, moved like water, graceful, unbothered, and completely aware of the storm she had unleashed. She smiled politely at the staff, exchanged a few casual words with Richard, and yet there was a glint in her eyes that suggested she knew far more than she was letting on. Ethan, standing near the sweeping staircase, observed silently. He had noticed something unusual last night. Clara's glances weren't random, her gestures weren't careless. Everything about her was deliberate, measured. He whispered to himself, "There's something she's hiding, something important." The staff exchanged nervous looks behind their hands. But what Ethan found even stranger was the way Clara seemed to subtly manipulate everyone around her. A raised eyebrow, a gentle nod, a perfectly timed smile. It was like she was orchestrating reactions, testing the waters, seeing who could be controlled and who resisted. Ethan moved closer, pretending to admire the winter garden visible through the mansion's floor-to-ceiling windows. He wanted to observe her without being noticed, to understand why his grandfather trusted her so completely. And then he heard it, a faint murmur between Clara and a housekeeper, words so low they were almost lost in the winter wind. "They're watching," Clara said softly, almost conspiratorially. The housekeeper nodded, eyes wide. "Tonight, everyone will see." Ethan froze. Tonight? What happens tonight? He didn't know, but the urgency in her tone sent a shiver down his spine. Something big was about to happen, and he wasn't sure he wanted to be caught in it, yet he couldn't look away. In the dining room, Olivia and Victor strategized. "We need to stop this," Olivia hissed. "We can't let her take everything. Richard is old, he's vulnerable. We need proof, something concrete." Victor's lips curved in a half-smile. "I have a plan. But first, we need to know who she really is. This woman didn't just appear out of nowhere." Meanwhile, Clara entered the family library, a place that was meant to be private and secure. She ran her fingers along the spines of ancient leather-bound books, her expression thoughtful. It wasn't just charm or beauty that made her dangerous. It was her intelligence, her calculation. Every move was deliberate, designed to maintain control without ever showing the slightest weakness. Ethan followed her discreetly, heart pounding. His curiosity and suspicion had become a mix of fear and fascination. Who was she really? And why did Richard trust her with everything? The morning turned to afternoon, and whispers circulated like wildfire. Family members talked behind hands, the staff speculated, and Clara moved seamlessly through it all, untouchable, unshaken, and completely in command of her own narrative. Ethan realized something chilling. While everyone else focused on anger, Clara's true power was subtle. She didn't need to fight to win. She just had to exist in the room, and the chaos unfolded around her. As he retreated to the balcony overlooking the snow-covered gardens, Ethan whispered again, almost to himself, "I have to find out who she really is before it's too late." Clara had a secret plan, whispered only in the shadows. But what was it, and how far would she go to claim the Davenport fortune? Ethan was about to find out whether he was ready or not. The morning sun filtered softly through the massive windows of Richard Davenport's study. The room smelled of polished wood, old leather, and faint traces of Richard's signature cologne. It was the kind of space that whispered power and wealth, a place where decades of deals, secrets, and ambitions were tucked away in every corner. Ethan stepped inside, his mind racing. He wasn't just curious anymore. He was determined. Clara had changed the rules of the game overnight, and he needed answers. He needed to understand why his grandfather trusted her, and whether she could be trusted herself. He began by digging through the study's archives, old drawers and shelves filled with photographs, letters, and memorabilia. Each photo seemed more cryptic than the last. Richard, young and dashing, posing with women from all walks of life, glamorous business partners, elegant socialites, and mysterious figures whose names were barely legible in faded ink. Ethan's finger paused over a yellowed photograph of Richard standing beside a young woman in Paris, a faint smile tugging at his lips. There was something familiar in her eyes, something that reminded him, oddly, of Clara. Could it be a coincidence? Or had Clara studied every detail of Richard's past to find the perfect moment and angle to enter his life? He flipped through a stack of invitations, gala programs, and personal diaries. In one diary, Richard had written about a love lost a woman who had vanished with part of his fortune decades ago. The words were bitter, tinged with regret and longing. Ethan's pulse quickened. If Clara knew about this, if she had access to this hidden history, then everything about her presence here could have been premeditated. Ethan leaned back in the leather chair, rubbing his temples. The more he uncovered, the more questions arose. Had Clara been watching the family for years? Was she manipulating Richard? Or was there another layer to this story, something even deeper? Outside, the mansion seemed calm, almost serene, belying the storm brewing inside. The snow glistened on the grounds, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that danger was already inside the walls. Every whisper, every glance, could hide a secret or a threat. He picked up another letter, this one written in Richard's hand decades ago, addressed to a woman whose name he couldn't fully decipher. It spoke of trust, betrayal, and a promise that had been broken. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Could Clara be connected to this past? Could she be the missing piece Richard never mentioned, the one who understood him in ways no family member ever could? Ethan heard footsteps behind him and quickly tucked the letters away. It was just a maid delivering tea, but the interruption reminded him that in a house like this, everyone had a role, and some roles were far more dangerous than they appeared. By late afternoon, Ethan had uncovered a series of clues. Photographs of Clara visiting social events years before she officially met Richard, small notes in Richard's old diaries that hinted at the presence of a mysterious young woman, and subtle references to past threats to the family fortune. Each piece painted a picture of someone not just lucky, but strategic, intelligent, and patient. He realized he couldn't approach this casually. Clara wasn't just a girlfriend, she was a calculated force. And if he didn't uncover her true intentions soon, the family's legacy could be at risk. Ethan left the study with a plan. He would start discreetly, observe, record, and gather information. Clara's calm exterior might fool everyone else, but he was determined to see what lay beneath the polished smiles and perfect posture. He wasn't just protecting wealth anymore. He was protecting the truth. Some secrets are hidden for a reason, and uncovering them could cost Ethan more than he expected. But one thing was clear. Clara's story was far from simple, and tonight, the real games would begin. Night had fallen over the Davenport mansion, and the storm outside had begun. Rain lashed against the massive windows, reflecting the flickering lights from the towering Christmas tree inside. Shadows stretched across the marble floors, casting eerie shapes that danced with every flicker of the candlelight. Ethan couldn't sleep. The events of the past 2 days gnawed at him. His grandfather's sudden decision, Clara's unsettling calm, and the whispers of hidden motives. Something in him refused to remain idle. He needed answers. Clad in a dark coat, Ethan silently moved through the halls, careful not to alert the staff or family. Every creak of the floorboards felt amplified in the quiet mansion. His instincts led him toward the greenhouse, a secluded structure at the far end of the estate. Clara had wandered there earlier in the afternoon, and Ethan suspected that something more than a casual stroll awaited. As he approached, the faint glow of lanterns illuminated the greenhouse interior. Ethan's pulse quickened. Through the glass, he saw Clara standing in the center, facing a shadowy figure whose features were obscured by darkness. She held a small envelope in her hand. "They're watching," she said softly, her voice calm yet commanding. The figure nodded, stepping closer, slipping something into her hand. Ethan crouched behind a cluster of ferns, barely breathing, trying to make sense of what he was witnessing. This wasn't casual. This wasn't innocent. Something significant was happening, and Clara was at the center of it. Every gesture she made was deliberate, the tilt of her head, the way she extended her hand, the barely perceptible smirk as she accepted the envelope. Ethan's mind raced. Was this a payoff? A secret message? Or something far more dangerous, perhaps a key to understanding why she had suddenly become the heir to everything Richard owned? Suddenly, Clara glanced toward the greenhouse door. Ethan froze, pressed against the wall of vines, heart hammering. She didn't see him. She never would, he realized. Clara had the uncanny ability to command attention while remaining entirely untouchable. He had underestimated her before, but not anymore. Minutes passed like hours. The shadowy figure spoke in a low tone, barely audible. Clara responded with quiet confidence. Ethan strained to hear, but the words remained elusive, muffled by the glass and the wind outside. What was so urgent that it had to happen in secret, in the dead of night? Then, as suddenly as it began, the meeting ended. Clara turned gracefully, the envelope carefully tucked away, and walked back toward the main house. The shadowy figure melted into the night, leaving Ethan alone with his pounding heart and racing thoughts. He remained crouched among the ferns, absorbing everything. The envelope could hold anything: secrets, leverage, evidence, or perhaps a threat. Ethan knew one thing for certain. Clara's influence over his grandfather was far deeper than anyone had imagined. She wasn't just charming or lucky. She was deliberate, calculated, and always one step ahead. As Ethan retreated silently to his room, he felt a chill run down his spine. The mansion was quiet again, but the tension remained a palpable weight that hung over every hallway and doorway. He realized that understanding Clara wasn't enough. He had to anticipate her next move. The night stretched long and uncertain. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, a more dangerous tempest was brewing. Secrets, lies, and motives collided in the darkness, and Ethan was now a part of it, whether he was ready or not. Clara's secret meeting had been a glimpse into a world Ethan didn't yet understand. But what was in the envelope, and how far would she go to protect it? Tonight, the game had just begun. The morning after Clara's late-night meeting, the Davenport mansion was tense, almost unbearably so. The halls echoed with hushed arguments and sharp whispers. Even the servants moved with careful precision, fearful of saying the wrong word to the wrong person. At breakfast, the family gathered in silence. Plates sat untouched. The golden sunlight streaming through the massive windows did little to warm the icy tension between them. Olivia glared across the table at Clara, her emerald eyes burning with fury. "How can you sit there smiling after everything Dad just gave you?" Clara sipped her tea gracefully, her fingers delicate around the china cup. Her calm, measured response only fueled Olivia's anger. "I didn't take anything," Clara said softly, her voice almost a whisper, but every word cut like a knife. "Your grandfather chose. You don't need to be so dramatic." Victor slammed his fist lightly on the table. "Dramatic?
Dramatic?
She's manipulating him, and you're all too blind to see it." His dark eyes swept the room, daring anyone to disagree. Ethan, seated at the far end, watched in quiet disbelief. Clara's late-night meeting had changed everything. There was no question now. She wasn't merely a girlfriend. She was strategic, calculating, and fully aware of the power she held over Richard. Olivia leaned closer to Ethan, whispering urgently, "We need to do something. He can't leave everything to her. Not without a fight." Ethan's mind raced. They couldn't confront Richard outright.
Not yet.
He had to know what Clara was really planning first. Every detail mattered: the envelope, the late-night meeting, her poised confidence. One wrong move could escalate this into a family disaster, or worse. Meanwhile, Clara excused herself politely, gliding past everyone toward the grand staircase. Every movement, Every subtle glance seemed designed to remind the family she was untouchable. The tension followed her like a shadow. Later, in the library, Ethan and Victor convened a private discussion. Victor's hands were folded tightly on the table, his jaw set. "We need leverage," he said. She has Dad wrapped around her finger. "If we want to stop this, we need to find something, anything that proves her intentions." Ethan nodded slowly, recalling the hidden cameras he'd suspected in the greenhouse, the envelope, and Clara's uncanny knowledge of Richard's past. "I know, but it has to be subtle. One wrong move, and Dad could cut us all out completely. Not just the inheritance, but trust too." Across the mansion, Olivia stormed into her father's private study, demanding answers.
Dad.
"How could you do this to your family? To us?" Richard, sitting behind his grand mahogany desk, did not flinch. He looked older than yesterday, but his eyes still held their steel. "Because I trust her," he said simply. "And I trust her judgment. That's all the answer you need." Olivia's face contorted in disbelief. "Trust? Trust? Dad, this isn't trust. This is reckless." Richard didn't respond further. Instead, he poured himself another glass of brandy and looked out at the rain-soaked grounds. It was a calm that no one else could understand, and it only made the family angrier. Ethan returned to his room later, the house now eerily silent except for the storm outside. His thoughts churned. Clara wasn't just clever, she was deliberate, calculating, and patient. She had entered their world with precision, knowing exactly how to manipulate, when to act, and what to hide. He knew one thing with certainty. The family's unity was already fracturing, and it wouldn't be long before lines were drawn. By tonight, arguments would escalate. Secrets would surface. And Clara's influence over Richard would be tested possibly against them. The storm outside pounded harder against the mansion. Shadows of lightning danced across the walls, mirroring the turmoil inside. Ethan felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. The true battle for the Davenport legacy had only just begun. The family's anger was only the beginning. What Clara did next, and what Ethan discovered tonight, could change the course of everything. One wrong move, and the Davenport empire could crumble from within. By mid-afternoon, the storm outside had subsided, leaving a crisp, chilly wind and puddles reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. Inside the Davenport mansion, tension still lingered like smoke, but Clara had her own plan, and she wielded it with precision. She appeared in the drawing room, radiant in a white silk dress that hugged her figure with elegance and poise. Every hair, every detail, seemed calculated to perfection. She smiled politely at Olivia and Victor, extended a hand to the staff, and nodded to Richard, who was seated comfortably in his favorite armchair. The family's emotions, a mixture of anger, resentment, and curiosity, hung thickly in the room. Clara began her charm offensive with soft, deliberate words, each carefully crafted to disarm suspicion while subtly asserting control. "It's truly an honor to be here with your family," she said, her voice warm, almost musical, but carrying an underlying confidence that suggested she already knew she was in command. Olivia's hands clenched into fists. "Honor? You mean control," she muttered under her breath. Victor's dark eyes followed Clara with distrust, but even he couldn't completely mask the effect she had on others. Some staff members, previously nervous, now smiled softly, caught by Clara's subtle charisma. Ethan, seated quietly in the corner, observed everything. Clara's influence was frightening in its subtlety. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to argue. Her presence alone shifted the room's dynamics, creating tension, admiration, and even envy, all at once. She approached Richard, lightly touching his arm as she spoke, and he responded with an unguarded smile. Ethan noticed the ease with which she moved through the room, a predator disguised in elegance, knowing every step, every glance, every word mattered. Clara's charm extended to conversations with the staff, volunteers, and even family members she barely knew. A simple compliment, a well-timed joke, and she had everyone hanging on her every word. By the time tea was served, the atmosphere had subtly shifted, anger had dimmed, replaced with intrigue and cautious respect. But Ethan remained cautious. He had seen the shadowy figure from the greenhouse. He remembered the envelope. Clara wasn't just charming. She was strategic. Every smile, every gesture was part of a calculated plan. And he knew that if he didn't uncover the truth soon, the family could lose not just their fortune, but control of their own lives. Olivia finally spoke, breaking the carefully crafted calm. "I don't trust you," she said sharply, her voice cutting through the polite murmurings. "And I won't stand by while you manipulate Dad." Clara's smile didn't falter. "I understand your concern, Olivia," she said softly. "But trust is earned, and I am here to earn it, not to steal it." The words were careful, almost soothing, yet layered with authority. Victor leaned back, arms crossed. "We'll see about that," he muttered under his breath, but even his tone had an edge of caution now. Clara had the upper hand, and everyone knew it. As the afternoon faded into evening, Ethan realized something chilling. Clara's charm wasn't just about disarming people. It was a weapon subtle, invisible, yet devastatingly effective. And unless he could expose her next move, the Davenport family might be walking into a trap they didn't even see coming. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the mansion's marble floors. Clara's calm, confident demeanor left the room in a strange state, tension mixed with admiration, suspicion mixed with curiosity. And in Ethan's mind, one question loomed large. How far will she go to secure her place in this family, and what is she really planning tonight? Clara's charm had worked for now, but the real test was coming. Would the family realize too late that her elegance hid ambition, calculation, and secrets deeper than anyone imagined? If someone used charm and influence to gain your family's trust, would you see it coming or be fooled like Richard's family? Comment below what you'd do. The mansion was quiet that evening, the only sounds the ticking of a grand clock and the occasional crackle of the fireplace. But inside Ethan's mind, chaos roared. Clara's charm offensive had left the family distracted, but he knew better. She wasn't here to charm. She was here to control. Determined to uncover her plan, Ethan returned to his grandfather's study. He knew the study held decades of secrets, contracts, letters, and hidden agreements. And tonight, he wasn't leaving without answers. As he rifled through drawers and cabinets, his fingers brushed against something unusual, a thin, unmarked folder tucked behind a row of law books. Curious, he pulled it out. Inside were several documents, contracts, signatures, and legal notes, but one caught his attention immediately. It was a contract, dated only weeks ago, with Richard's signature at the bottom. The document transferred specific powers over the Davenport estate, investments, and trust funds directly to Clara, giving her full legal authority over key properties and even the family business, effective immediately. Ethan's heart pounded. This wasn't just manipulation, it was calculated. Clara had waited for the perfect moment to secure legal control, leaving the family powerless. She had planned everything down to the last detail. A soft noise behind him made Ethan spin. Clara was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, leaning casually against the frame, her calm smile unnerving. "I see you found it," she said quietly, voice like silk but with an edge of steel. Ethan swallowed, trying to steady his racing heart. How did you get this signed?" he demanded. Clara stepped forward, her movements deliberate, almost predatory. "Richard trusts me. He believes in me. I didn't coerce him, I simply gave him a reason to trust his instincts." Her eyes sparkled, but there was no warmth in them. "Do you understand now why I am here?" Ethan realized he was not facing a naive girlfriend. He was facing a strategist who had studied every weakness, every moment, and every opportunity in the Davenport family. She had orchestrated this perfectly. The storm outside intensified, rain pounding against the mansion windows, mirroring the chaos that was now inevitable inside. Ethan knew he had to act quickly. If he revealed the contract, Clara might retaliate. If he waited, the family could be permanently stripped of their legacy. Before he could speak, Clara added, almost conversationally, "Power isn't given, Ethan. It's taken carefully, deliberately. And I intend to honor what Richard and I built together, whether the rest of your family understands it or not." Ethan's mind raced. Every move from this point on needed precision. Clara wasn't just clever, she was dangerous, patient, and fully aware of her advantage. She had secured legal authority while everyone else argued and fumed, leaving the Davenport family trapped by their own trust in Richard. He realized something chilling. The game had escalated beyond charm and subtle manipulation. Now it was legal, binding, and irrevocable. One wrong step, and the family could lose everything: their fortune, their influence, and even their dignity. As Clara turned and left the study, Ethan remained frozen, the contract clutched in his hand. His mind was a whirlwind of questions and strategies. Could he find a loophole? Could he uncover proof of manipulation or coercion? Or was it already too late? Outside, lightning flashed across the stormy night, illuminating the mansion in stark white light, as if signaling the dangerous path ahead. Ethan understood one truth clearly. To protect the Davenport legacy, he would need courage, cunning, and perhaps a little luck. And he knew that the next move could decide everything. The hidden contract wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a weapon. And now, Clara had the advantage. Could Ethan find a way to turn the tables before the Davenport family was permanently outmaneuvered? The mansion had settled into an uneasy quiet. Rain had stopped, leaving a crisp night air and puddles glistening in the garden light. But inside Ethan's mind, there was no rest. The discovery of the hidden contract had shattered any illusions of innocence. Clara wasn't just a girlfriend. She was a strategist who had silently maneuvered the family into her hands. Ethan knew he couldn't confront her directly, not yet. He needed proof, and he needed allies. Quietly, he moved through the corridors of the mansion, careful not to alert Clara or anyone else. Every creak of the floorboards could betray him, but he welcomed the risk. This was a war, and every detail mattered. His first stop was the greenhouse. He had seen Clara meet with a shadowy figure, and he suspected that meeting had involved more than just casual discussion. He scanned the area for any clues, notes, items, even hidden cameras. Among the ferns and pots, he found a small device tucked behind a shelf. It was a voice recorder, modern and sleek, probably overlooked by the staff. Heart pounding, Ethan activated the playback. A soft, urgent conversation filled his ears. Clara's voice was unmistakable, calm and controlled, but layered with precision. "The family won't suspect anything tonight. The papers are ready. By tomorrow, everything shifts in our favor." The shadowy figure's voice responded, agreement faint but tense. Ethan's pulse raced. She had anticipated everything. She hadn't just charmed the family, she had planned, calculated, and executed steps weeks in advance. This wasn't opportunistic. It was meticulous, intentional, and designed to secure her power. He carefully pocketed the device and left the greenhouse, moving next to the mansion's office, where financial records and sensitive documents were kept. He began poring through digital archives, emails, and bank transfers. Every signature he found, every unusual transaction, began to paint a picture. Clara had been involved behind the scenes long before anyone suspected. Minutes turned into hours. Ethan's determination burned bright, his mind racing with questions. Could he find proof of coercion or manipulation? Could he locate a loophole to challenge the contract legally? The stakes were higher than ever. One misstep, and Clara would discover him, and he could lose more than just the family's fortune. As he worked, Ethan noticed a soft movement behind the office curtains. A shadow flickered, and for a moment, he froze. It was Clara, standing just beyond the threshold, her silhouette elegant and calm. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence alone reminded him of the game. He was now playing a game where one wrong move could change everything. Clara finally turned and walked away, her heels clicking softly on the marble floors. Ethan exhaled, shaken but resolute. She hadn't seen him, not yet. And that meant he still had time. Determined to protect his family and expose the truth, Ethan began compiling evidence, financial records, past correspondence, and the recorder from the greenhouse. He knew that to challenge Clara's influence, He had to act strategically, just as she had. Outside, the night sky was clear, stars glimmering faintly through the clouds. Inside the mansion, Ethan worked tirelessly, piecing together the puzzle. Each discovery made him more certain. Clara's plan was brilliant, but it wasn't foolproof. Every action she had taken left traces, and Ethan intended to follow them, step by step, until the full truth was revealed. Ethan's investigation was only beginning. But what would he discover next? And could he stop Clara before she solidified her control over the Davenport family forever? The morning sun cut through the frost on the mansion windows, but inside, the Davenport household felt colder than the winter outside. Ethan had spent the night compiling evidence, carefully connecting the dots of Clara's manipulation. Now, armed with documents, recordings, and a clear plan, he knew it was time to confront the family. Olivia and Victor were waiting in the drawing room, tension etched into their faces. Olivia's hands trembled slightly as she took the stack of papers from Ethan. "This is it, isn't it?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded, sliding the voice recorder across the table. Victor's eyes darkened as he reviewed the documents, a mix of anger and disbelief washing over him. "She's been planning this for months," he muttered. "Every transaction, every move calculated." Richard entered the room quietly, unaware of the storm about to hit. "What are you two whispering about?" he asked, concern creeping into his voice. Clara appeared behind him, poised and calm as ever, her presence commanding the room without a word. Ethan cleared his throat, voice steady despite the tension. "Grandfather, this is serious. Clara has been manipulating not just you, but the family, and she's secured legal control over the estate. Look at this." He placed the contract and recordings on the table, the evidence impossible to ignore. Clara's calm smile didn't falter. "Ethan, I think you're exaggerating," she said lightly, brushing imaginary dust from her dress. "I've done nothing but gain your grandfather's trust." Olivia's voice broke through, sharp and accusing. "Trust? This isn't trust. It's deception. You've been plotting behind our backs, and now you're sitting there acting innocent." Victor slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. We deserve answers, Richard. How could you sign off on this without consulting your family?" Richard looked at Clara, then at his children, torn between love, trust, and duty. "I believed she was the right person for me for the family. I thought I could trust my instincts," he admitted quietly, his voice heavy with regret. Ethan spoke again, his tone firm but respectful. "Grandfather, you've been misled. Look at the recordings. She's been orchestrating every step. If we don't act now, the family legacy could be lost." Clara's eyes flashed with intensity for the first time. "Ethan, you underestimate me," she said, her calm voice now edged with steel. "I didn't force anyone. I simply prepared for the opportunity. And the opportunity came." The room fell into tense silence, broken only by the faint crackling of the fireplace. The weight of betrayal pressed down on everyone. Richard's trust, the family's legacy, and their sense of unity all teetered on the edge. Ethan stepped closer, holding the recorder up. "It's not too late, Grandfather. We can challenge this legally, but we need to act together. Otherwise, everything, the estate, the business, even your trust in us could be gone." Richard's hands shook as he picked up the contract, reading it with growing realization. Clara's calm demeanor now seemed almost predatory, like a chess master watching the pieces move around her. Finally, Olivia spoke, voice trembling but resolute. "We can't let her win. Not like this. Not after everything our family has built." Clara's smile softened, almost imperceptibly. "We'll see," she whispered, a promise hidden within the words. The confrontation ended with no resolution, only tension, suspicion, and a sense that the family's battle had only begun. Ethan understood the truth now. Clara's charm and strategy had forced them into a corner, but he wasn't giving up. Not now, not ever. Clara had won the first round, but the Davenport family wasn't finished. One wrong move could destroy her plans, or theirs. And tonight, the true test of loyalty, cunning, and courage would begin. The air in the Davenport mansion was thick with tension after the morning confrontation. Ethan, Olivia, and Victor thought they had the upper hand, armed with evidence of Clara's manipulations. But Clara had never been one to rely solely on charm. She was a calculated force who thrived in chaos. By evening, she called a family meeting in the Grand Hall, her presence commanding attention as everyone gathered reluctantly. Candles flickered along the walls, casting long, dancing shadows, creating an atmosphere of elegance mixed with unspoken danger. Clara's smile was serene, almost disarming. "I understand there's concern regarding my position in this family," she began, voice soft yet firm. "And I respect that. But before accusations fly, I think transparency is required." She stepped forward, producing a small stack of documents. "While some may believe I orchestrated events to control the estate, the truth is more complicated. My actions were always guided by your grandfather's interests, his safety, his legacy, and his vision for the family." Ethan's jaw tightened. She was reframing the narrative, twisting the evidence he had collected, and planting doubt in the family's minds. Every word was deliberate, every gesture precise. Clara walked slowly around the grand hall, letting her presence absorb the room. "I anticipated your concerns and gathered information not to deceive, but to protect. Unfortunately, timing made it appear otherwise. But the documents I hold now," she gestured to the stack, "clarify intentions that some of you have misunderstood." Olivia's eyes narrowed. "Misunderstood? Clara, you signed legal documents giving yourself power over Dad's estate. That's not a misunderstanding, that's manipulation." Clara smiled faintly, unshaken. "A wise family always plans for the future. My goal was to ensure the estate's stability, not personal gain. But I can see how actions, taken out of context, appear threatening. That's why transparency is necessary." Victor crossed his arms, skeptical. "Transparency? We have recordings, contracts, and your meetings at night. Explain that." Clara turned gracefully toward him, her calm gaze piercing. "Those meetings were discussions about potential threats to the family, outside investors, rival business interests, and legal loopholes that could have jeopardized your grandfather's fortune. I simply took precautions. If you doubt my intentions, you'll soon see that my strategy has protected this family in ways unseen." Ethan's heart sank slightly. Clara's counterplay wasn't aggression, it was control through narrative. She had anticipated confrontation and built a defense around perception, bending facts to make the family question themselves. Every piece of evidence Ethan thought was damning now seemed to have plausible explanations in her hands. The room fell silent. Even Richard, normally unwavering, furrowed his brow, torn between trusting his children or Clara. Her words had planted seeds of doubt, subtly repositioning her as a guardian rather than a manipulator. Ethan realized the danger. Clara wasn't just clever, she was unassailable without irrefutable proof. Every move he made from this point needed to be smarter, sharper, and faster. Any hesitation could let her solidify control entirely. As the meeting concluded, Clara left the room with quiet confidence, leaving the family unsettled, uncertain, and slightly divided. Ethan knew the war for the Davenport legacy had just escalated to a new level, one where charm, strategy, and perception could outweigh evidence. Clara's counterplay had worked. She had regained the family's trust while keeping her plans intact. But Ethan now had a choice: escalate the investigation, or risk losing the family to a strategist whose every move was calculated. The Davenport mansion seemed calm, but Ethan knew better. Clara's counterplay had sown doubt and uncertainty, dividing the family. If he was going to regain the upper hand, he couldn't fight her alone. He needed an alliance, someone with access, knowledge, and the courage to challenge Clara's carefully constructed facade. Ethan's first thought was Olivia. Her fire and determination had already proven invaluable. Victor, though cautious, could also be persuaded with the right proof. But he needed someone else, a wild card, someone outside the immediate family who understood business, legal intricacies, and Clara's subtle manipulations. That evening, Ethan sent a discreet message to Lucas Harrington, a family lawyer and trusted advisor who had managed the Davenport estate for decades. Lucas had always been skeptical of outsiders influencing Richard, and Ethan suspected he would see through Clara's charm. They met in a quiet cafe, far from the mansion's prying eyes. Lucas, a sharp man in his early 60s with steel-gray hair and an analytical gaze, leaned back in his chair, listening intently as Ethan laid out the situation. "She's already secured legal authority over major assets," Ethan explained, his voice low but urgent. "Contracts, trust documents, and even financial records. She's calculated every move. We can't confront her directly, not yet. But if we gather evidence, we can challenge her legally and protect the family." Lucas nodded slowly, steepling his fingers. "This isn't just about family drama," he said gravely. "This is manipulation at the highest level. And you're right, we need proof. We need a plan, and it has to be airtight. One slip, and she'll turn the family against you completely." The two strategized, laying out steps to uncover Clara's hidden motives. First, they would investigate the financial transactions she had influenced. Second, they would look for legal loopholes in the contracts Ethan had discovered. Third, they would discreetly monitor Clara's movements to anticipate her next move. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Ethan shared limited details with Olivia and Victor, careful not to reveal too much. "We have to act strategically," he warned. "Clara's influence is strong. One mistake, and she could gain irreversible control. But if we work together, we can expose her and reclaim the family's trust and assets." Olivia's eyes gleamed with determination. "We won't let her win. She may be clever, but she underestimates the Davenport family." Victor finally spoke, his voice steady. "All right, I'm in. But we move carefully. Every action must be precise. She's watching." Ethan felt a surge of relief. With Lucas's expertise and his siblings' support, they finally had a plan. Clara was formidable, but even the most calculated strategist could falter under the right pressure. The night stretched on, shadows of the mansion cast by moonlight dancing across the walls. Ethan knew the coming days would be critical. Every observation, every document, every conversation could tip the scales. Clara had underestimated his resolve, and now she was about to find out that the Davenport family wasn't so easily controlled. The secret alliance was formed. But would it be enough to outsmart Clara, or had she already anticipated their next move? The battle for the Davenport legacy was about to reach a new level of intensity. The next morning, the Davenport mansion buzzed with an uneasy energy. Clara moved gracefully through the halls, unaware that Ethan and his secret alliance had already begun to plan a trap, a carefully staged scenario designed to test her intentions and catch her off guard. Ethan and Lucas had studied her routines meticulously. They knew Clara preferred private meetings in the library and often checked her phone for updates on family and financial matters. That was where they would begin. Victor and Olivia helped prepare the room, subtly placing documents and digital evidence where Clara was sure to notice. It wasn't a confrontation, it was a lure, designed to provoke a reaction without alerting her to the full scale of their investigation. As the afternoon sun poured through tall windows, Clara entered the library, her elegance unshaken. She noticed the documents at first, but didn't show alarm, only mild curiosity. Her eyes scanned the papers, and her fingers brushed lightly across the top of a folder, a graceful yet calculated gesture. Ethan, hidden behind the archway, observed every movement. He noticed the slight tightening of her jaw, the subtle narrowing of her eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Clara's composure was cracking ever so slightly, and that was all the confirmation he needed. Clara finally spoke, her voice calm and measured. "Interesting," she said, picking up one of the documents. "It seems someone has been busy." Her gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Ethan's hidden position. "I wonder how much do you know?" Victor and Olivia exchanged tense glances, hearts pounding. Ethan signaled them to remain still. The trap was working. They had forced Clara to reveal a hint of her true intentions, to react to the evidence without knowing the full scope of the investigation. Clara set the document down carefully and walked to the fireplace, her expression thoughtful. "Clever," she murmured, almost to herself. "But cleverness alone won't change outcomes." Ethan knew this was the moment to escalate. He quietly activated the recorder from the previous investigation and left it running, hoping to capture Clara's next move. Every word she spoke, every subtle gesture, could now be documented, a potential key to legally challenging her influence over the family. Minutes later, Clara moved to leave, pausing at the doorway. "I see your efforts," she said softly, her tone almost admiring. "But remember, anticipation is power. And I have anticipated much more than you realize." Ethan and his allies held their breath as she disappeared from view. The trap had worked. She had reacted, subtly but undeniably, to evidence she hadn't expected them to present. Now they had what they needed, a glimpse into her strategy and the beginnings of leverage to counter her. The mansion, once serene and elegant, now felt like a chessboard. Every room held potential for confrontation. Every hallway was a pathway to strategy. Ethan realized something crucial. Clara was clever, but not infallible. With patience, precision, and timing, even the most calculated manipulator could be caught off guard. The first trap had worked, but Clara had already hinted she was 3 steps ahead. Could Ethan and the family capitalize on this advantage before she regrouped, or was this just the beginning of a deeper, more dangerous game? If you had the chance to catch a mastermind off guard, would you risk confrontation or wait for more proof? Comment below with your strategy and explain why. The mansion was eerily quiet that night, as if holding its breath for what was about to unfold. Ethan moved cautiously through the dimly lit corridors, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. Clara had proven she was clever, strategic, and dangerously perceptive. But tonight, Ethan hoped to uncover a weakness, hidden evidence that could finally tip the scales in their favor. Lucas had suggested a meticulous review of all financial transactions, personal communications, and family archives. Ethan had spent days cross-referencing, connecting patterns, and identifying anomalies. And finally, in the family's private archive room hidden behind a sliding wall in the library, he found something unusual, a small, locked safe, partially concealed by a tapestry. Ethan's pulse quickened. The safe was unremarkable, but the combination had been subtly hinted at in Clara's earlier correspondences with the shadowy figure he had recorded in the greenhouse. Using careful deduction, he managed to unlock it. Inside, neatly organized, were stacks of documents, folders, and USB drives, records of transactions, secret agreements, and correspondence that directly linked Clara to a hidden plan to consolidate control over the Davenport estate. Among the papers was a letter addressed to an anonymous associate, detailing specific steps Clara had taken, influencing legal advisors, manipulating Richard's trust, and coordinating key investments. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. It was irrefutable proof, the hidden evidence Ethan had been searching for. Before he could fully process the discovery, a faint noise made him freeze. Footsteps, deliberate and soft, approaching the archive room. Ethan's heart raced. Clara. She had somehow anticipated that someone might find the safe. As the door creaked open, Clara's silhouette appeared, her poise unshaken. "Looking for something?" she asked, voice calm, almost playful. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on the documents Ethan had barely tucked away. Ethan stepped forward, determined. "This ends tonight, Clara. We have proof. The family deserves to know your true intentions." Clara's lips curved into a subtle smile, but there was a hint of tension in her eyes. "Proof, you say? Interesting. But remember, even evidence can be spun into a story. What matters is perception." Ethan realized she was still dangerous, still thinking 3 steps ahead. But now, armed with the hidden evidence, he had leverage she couldn't ignore. Clara had anticipated charm and strategy, but she hadn't accounted for determination backed by irrefutable proof. The mansion seemed to hold its breath as Ethan carefully packed the documents. He knew the coming confrontation would determine the fate of the Davenport family, their fortune, and their legacy. And one thought kept echoing in his mind. One piece of evidence could change everything if used at the right time, in the right way. The hidden evidence had been found. But would it be enough to finally expose Clara before she could strike again, or had she anticipated this move as well? The next confrontation would decide the Davenport family's future. The morning sun filtered through the towering windows of Lucas Harrington's law office, but there was no warmth in the air, only a tense anticipation. Ethan, Olivia, and Victor had gathered with Lucas, armed with the hidden evidence they had painstakingly uncovered. Today, they would take the first steps to legally challenge Clara's growing influence over the Davenport estate. Ethan placed the documents and USB drives on the polished mahogany table, watching Lucas study each piece with meticulous attention. "This," Lucas said slowly, "is irrefutable. Clara has been orchestrating control over the estate without your grandfather fully understanding the implications. This gives us a strong foundation for a legal challenge." Olivia's hand shook slightly as she leaned forward. "Can we really stop her?" she asked, voice full of urgency. Lucas looked up, his gaze sharp and confident. "We can, but we must proceed carefully. Clara is cunning, and any misstep could allow her to twist the narrative in her favor. We'll file temporary injunctions, notify the court of manipulation, and challenge the validity of the contracts she signed with Richard." Victor, normally skeptical, nodded in agreement. "We need to act fast. If she senses this coming, she could cover her tracks or sway Richard again." Ethan's mind raced. Clara had always anticipated moves, but now the initiative had shifted. Armed with hidden evidence, strategic legal counsel, and the family's unity, they finally had leverage. By late afternoon, Lucas began drafting formal legal documents to present to the court, while Ethan prepared a timeline of Clara's actions, her communications, meetings, and contracts to serve as a factual backbone for the case. Every detail mattered. Every date, signature, and conversation could become critical. Meanwhile, Clara, unaware that her plans were being challenged, continued her elegant maneuvers in the mansion. She hosted the staff and family for dinner, projecting serenity and control. But even in her calm, Ethan and the alliance had set a quiet ripple of tension that Clara couldn't ignore entirely. That evening, as the legal documents were ready for filing, Ethan gathered Olivia and Victor. "We're finally on the offensive," he said. "We have proof, a plan, and legal support. Clara has been calculating every move, but now she has to respond to us." Lucas added, "Remember, this is just the beginning. The court process will take time, and Clara is resourceful. She will challenge, question, and attempt to manipulate perception. Stay united, stay patient, and stick to the evidence." The mansion seemed to hold its breath, as if sensing the impending storm. For the first time in months, Clara faced a challenge she hadn't fully anticipated: a coordinated, strategic response that could strip away her control and reveal her manipulation to everyone. The legal battle had begun, and Clara was about to discover that her charms and strategy could be countered by evidence, unity, and determination. But would she fight fair or unleash a new tactic that could turn the tables yet again? The Davenport mansion appeared serene that night, but beneath the surface, tension simmered like a storm about to break. Clara, having sensed a shift in the family's dynamics, knew something was amiss. Her calm facade gave nothing away, but her mind raced with plans, contingencies, and countermeasures. Earlier that afternoon, she had noticed Ethan consulting with Lucas in private. She had also observed subtle changes in Olivia and Victor: quiet glances, hushed conversations. Clara understood immediately. The family was mobilizing, armed with knowledge she hadn't anticipated being leveraged so soon. In the solitude of her lavish suite, Clara reviewed the mansion's cameras, emails, and intercepted messages, a network of subtle intelligence she had cultivated over months. Every movement, every hidden conversation, every piece of evidence Ethan thought he had uncovered had been, in part, anticipated. She had prepared for an eventual confrontation, but the legal battle was faster than she expected. Clara's counterattack was not loud or obvious. It was quiet, precise, and surgical. She began by planting doubts subtly in Richard's mind. Over dinner, she mentioned offhandedly, "It's interesting how interpretations of events can differ. Sometimes, even the most carefully compiled evidence can mislead the observer." Her words, casual yet strategic, sowed uncertainty, questioning the validity of what Ethan and the Alliance had discovered. Next, Clara moved to safeguard her assets. She quietly instructed a trusted financial advisor, someone outside the family's awareness, to transfer key holdings temporarily to secure accounts. The goal was simple. If the legal battle escalated, she would preserve her leverage and complicate the family's ability to challenge her authority. Meanwhile, Clara began crafting a narrative to control perception. Through subtle social media posts, public gestures of charity, and carefully worded communications to the press, she framed herself as a protective, family-oriented figure. Ethan and the family might have evidence, but Clara was now working to ensure perception favored her, turning public and internal opinion subtly in her favor. As she moved through the mansion that evening, her presence was serene but commanding. Staff and family alike felt her influence, even as they whispered among themselves about the ongoing legal challenges. Clara's control wasn't just strategic, it was psychological. Every interaction reinforced her authority, while Ethan and the Alliance had to tread carefully to avoid overexposure. Ethan, observing the mansion from the shadows, recognized the signs immediately. Clara's counterattack was working subtle, methodical, and dangerously effective. The legal battle might have begun, but the war for perception, control, and influence was only intensifying. He knew one thing: this was far from over. Clara's strategies were intricate, but he now had both evidence and allies. The coming days would test patience, precision, and the ability to anticipate the unthinkable. Every move counted, and any misstep could cost the family everything. Clara had struck back, quietly shifting perception and safeguarding her assets. Ethan and the family had to act quickly or risk losing the advantage they had fought so hard to gain. The true battle for the Davenport legacy was just beginning. The Davenport mansion had never felt more tense. Clara's subtle counterattacks had begun to unsettle the family, her influence spreading like quiet ripples across every room. Ethan knew they couldn't rely solely on legal maneuvers and hidden evidence. They needed a new perspective, someone with insight and connections that could expose Clara in ways they couldn't. Late one evening, as Ethan reviewed documents in the drawing room, a quiet knock echoed from the doorway. He looked up to see Margot, the mansion's long-serving house manager, standing there hesitantly. She had worked for the family for decades, loyal to Richard and the estate, but mostly invisible in the family's day-to-day politics. Her presence often went unnoticed, exactly why Ethan's heart leapt with hope. "I think I can help," Margot said softly, her eyes darting toward the mansion's upper corridors. "I've noticed things: unusual meetings, late-night visitors, papers moved or hidden. Clara isn't as untouchable as she thinks." Ethan's pulse quickened. Margot's intimate knowledge of the mansion's daily workings and its staff could be the key to uncovering Clara's hidden moves. He quickly brought her up to speed on their investigation and the legal battle underway. Margot listened intently, nodding in understanding, then offered critical insight. "There are rooms, offices, and hidden spaces Clara uses that even Richard rarely enters. I can show you what's being hidden. What she thinks she's keeping secret," Margot explained. Ethan and the siblings realized the potential immediately. Margot could grant access to places they hadn't considered, places where tangible proof of Clara's manipulations might still be hidden. But more importantly, she could operate without drawing attention, a ghost inside the mansion, observing, recording, and reporting. With her guidance, the family set a quiet plan in motion. Margot would discreetly monitor Clara's movements, document interactions, and identify any additional hidden contracts or communications. Every detail she uncovered would be meticulously recorded, adding layers to the legal case and strengthening the family's position. As the night deepened, Ethan felt a surge of hope. With Margot as their unexpected ally, they had a new advantage: insider knowledge that Clara couldn't anticipate. Yet they also knew one thing: her vigilance was extraordinary, and any misstep could alert her. The stakes had never been higher. By dawn, Margot had already begun her subtle reconnaissance, moving quietly through the mansion, noting every unusual action and interaction. Ethan watched from the shadows, adrenaline and anticipation coursing through him. With her help, They might finally expose Clara's full scheme. An unexpected ally had joined the fight, giving Ethan and the family a secret edge. But would it be enough to outmaneuver Clara's cunning mind, or would she detect the threat before they could act? Have you ever uncovered help in the most unexpected place? If you were Ethan, how would you use Margot's insider knowledge against Clara? Comment your strategy below. The Davenport mansion had become a battlefield of strategy and subtle manipulation. Clara, ever composed, had sensed cracks in her control, a combination of legal pressure, hidden evidence, and now Margot's insider observations. She understood one thing clearly. If she didn't act decisively, she could lose everything. That evening, Clara called an urgent private meeting with Richard. The chandeliers above bathed the room in warm golden light, but the atmosphere was anything but comforting. "Richard," Clara began softly, leaning close, "there's been some misunderstanding about my intentions. You know I only want what's best for you and the family." Richard, visibly torn, hesitated. The evidence Ethan had gathered weighed heavily on his mind, but Clara's calm influence still lingered. "Clara, I'm not sure anymore," he admitted. "The family's worried. They say you've been making moves without our knowledge." Clara's eyes softened, a calculated blend of vulnerability and persuasion. "Sometimes, Richard, people misunderstand actions that are meant to protect. But you know me, you trust me, don't you?" Meanwhile, unseen by Clara, Margot was shadowing her every move, taking notes, recording conversations, and observing the subtle gestures that hinted at Clara's desperation. She saw the carefully measured words, the slight tension behind Clara's calm eyes, and knew this was a turning point. Clara's next move was bold and risky. She approached the staff and a few influential family friends, hinting at possible instability in the family if the legal challenges proceeded. She framed Ethan and his siblings as overzealous, attempting to control decisions that were above their station. The goal was to isolate the family, manipulate perception, and create confusion, forcing Richard to second-guess the evidence. Ethan, Olivia, and Victor observed from a safe distance. They knew Clara was desperate, and desperation could lead to mistakes. Every word she said, every subtle action, was now evidence in their arsenal. They also realized that Clara's influence over perception was her strongest weapon, and it had to be dismantled carefully. That night, Clara retreated to her suite, reviewing her own contingency plans. The mansion, quiet and shadowed, seemed to echo her anxiety. For the first time, there was uncertainty in her calculated world. Ethan's alliance had forced her hand, and now every move she made would be scrutinized, recorded, and potentially used against her. Clara had made a desperate move to regain control, but it revealed cracks in her strategy. The Davenport family now had a chance to turn her missteps into leverage if they could act fast enough. The next day could change everything. The Davenport mansion was charged with anticipation. The battle between Clara and the family had escalated beyond strategy, manipulation, and legal maneuvers. Tonight, everything would be decided: the estate, the family's trust, and the legacy of Richard Davenport. Ethan, Olivia, Victor, and Margot had gathered, documents in hand, recordings ready, and evidence meticulously organized. Every hidden conversation, financial maneuver, and subtle manipulation had been documented. For the first time, Clara faced a united front, one that could not be ignored, persuaded, or manipulated. The confrontation took place in the Grand Hall, the same room where Clara had once commanded attention effortlessly. Tonight, her calm demeanor was met with unwavering resolve from the family. Candles flickered along the walls, shadows dancing, creating an atmosphere of suspense. Ethan stepped forward, voice steady but firm. "Clara, we've uncovered everything. The hidden accounts, the secret agreements, your manipulations of legal documents, it's all here. We have proof, and we will present it to the court if necessary." Clara's eyes flickered briefly, a hint of surprise before her signature composure returned. "Impressive," she said softly. "But remember, perception matters. You may have evidence, but how it's interpreted, that is what counts." Olivia, stepping beside Ethan, held up a stack of USB drives. This isn't about perception anymore.
This is about facts.
Every action you took, every secret you tried to hide, it's all documented. The family deserves the truth. Margot quietly handed over her notes and observations, revealing moments Clara thought no one had seen. Staff testimonies, subtle manipulations, and inconsistencies all formed a web that Clara could no longer control. For a moment, Clara paused, realizing the depth of exposure. Her mind raced legal consequences, loss of control, and the shattering of influence she had meticulously built. The air was thick with tension, each second stretching into eternity. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice calm but tinged with the first sign of defeat. "Perhaps I miscalculated," she admitted softly. "But remember, I only ever acted to protect the family's interests." Ethan shook his head. "Protect? Or control? The line is clear now, Clara. The family decides, not you." Richard entered quietly, observing the evidence firsthand. His eyes softened, a mixture of regret, realization, and relief. "Clara," he said, "I trusted you, but these actions,
They are not what I intended for my family.
it's time to restore balance." Clara, for the first time, looked uncertain. The mansion that had once amplified her power now felt like a cage. The Davenport family, united, had dismantled her influence step by step, turning every manipulation into proof of her overreach. As the confrontation concluded, the family moved to reclaim control of the estate, ensuring transparency, trust, and unity. Clara's desperate strategies had failed, her manipulations exposed, and the Davenport legacy secured. The mansion, once a stage for tension and deception, now breathed relief. The shadows of uncertainty were replaced with clarity and renewed trust, a family united against manipulation and secrecy. The battle was over. Clara's influence was ended, the estate safeguarded, and the Davenport family stronger for having faced deception together. Ethan, Olivia, Victor, and Margot had proven that unity, evidence, and strategy could overcome even the most cunning adversary. Every move counted, every secret revealed. If you were Ethan, would you have confronted Clara directly or relied on the law and strategy like he did? Comment below, how would you face a mastermind?